Hello everyone, and here, the little Frenchie in Big Texas. Welcome to my channel. So in this video, I want to give you some news from abroad. And before going abroad, I just want to share with you a feedback from my parents, given they visited us the last 2 weeks here, Houston area. And in the past, and when I say in the past, you need to look at it up to 15 years ago, so it's a pretty long distant past. The US used to be cheaper than Europe, way cheaper, for two reasons. First, the goods were cheaper here, and second, the exchange rate was at the advantage of people having euro. I remember 10 years ago, it was an exchange rate closer to 1.4. I mean, you have €1, you could get $1.4, so it makes everything a lot cheaper anyway. Plus, the goods were definitely at least 20% cheaper. So it was good for Europeans to come and shop here, whether it's clothes, name it, electronics. It was cheaper here. But this time, my mom came back after first shopping trip saying, Anne, prices have increased so much here, I am not buying anything this time. It is more expensive than at home. Look at that. So two things as well here. Prices have increased tremendously here at a faster pace than in Europe. It's starting in Europe, but they're a year behind probably in terms of inflation. And the exchange rate, because the euro has been going down. It's barely above the dollar right now. I think it's 1.05. So it's almost equal. So not worth it. I thought that was interesting. But going and looking at what's going on abroad. So I want to give you some news from France, but not only, because you've got some major headlines right now of what's going on in Asia and the Middle East. And all goes around the supply chain and the food here. So looking at the food and the shelves in France, from what I hear firsthand from my friends and family, so firsthand information, the shelves are not looking bad at all. They are pretty full. They are getting well stocked. Here we're struggling to get pasta. They have plenty and the prices have not increased, for instance. However, there are a few items that are starting to run low or completely gone. The first item that started was the sunflower oil. So they don't have canola. Canola is mainly coming from Canada. In Europe, it's a lot of sunflower, the vegetable oil. And where is the sunflower oil coming from? I'll let you take a guess. Ukraine, yes. So it just run out at the store. So there are other oils. So if you want soy, but not everybody likes soy. Of course, you get as much olive oil as you want. But they all have different properties, different ways to cook. You cannot do the same. And it's a cascading chain, because it also makes all the processed food supplier to change their recipe because of that shortage, which is a long-term shortage. So they have to change the whole recipes here. So aside from sunflower oil, the second item that's running low, it's very local. This one is mustard. And mustard is actually a really good example on how our supply chain is interconnected. See, the seeds of crisis, climate change, price hikes hit the Dijon mustard. Because where are these seeds coming from? A lot of them are actually coming from Canada, the world's biggest producer. And apparently there's been a disastrous drought in Western Canada last summer, which rocked that commodity here. Prices went up, and a direct hit on the well-known French mustard here. The French region hosts the vast majority of mustard manufacturers, but depends heavily on Canadian farmers in order to produce the strong, tangy condiment consumed the world over. We're in a crisis we haven't seen for 25 years. Look at that. The price of seed have gone up 3 to 4 times. Good example of our supply chain here. There's been also discussion about milk and the supply chain and being low in milk. and prices that increase across the board and starting to increase. So that's the case for coffee. It's pretty much everything. Flour, everything is increasing. That is France. But the crisis in Ukraine is a big supplier for instance, for Africa. And in some of these countries, they don't have the land and the water to produce. And it's a big issue for them to get the supplies right now. So Northern Africa, countries like Egypt, which a pretty dense population in certain urban area, big issue getting some of the basics coming from Ukraine. So that's looking at Middle East and the impact of Ukraine. But without even looking at the impact from Ukraine, you had headlines in the news today. I just turned on the TV and the headlines were on Iran and the protests in Iran. So when you look at the headlines here for Iran, soaring bread prices have triggered protests in Iran in which some shops were set on fire, prompting police to arrest scores of provocators. And these protests were triggered by a cut in government subsidies for imported wheat that caused prices hikes as high as 300% for a variety of flour-based staples. So that's a country with a 40% inflation, probably over 50, and with a high population below the poverty line. But could this happen here or in Europe? I mean, you have government subsidies on everything, including here. It's even more than that in Europe, especially in a country like France, where the government is in everything. And you see the difference between, for instance, France and the UK, where the government is less present. I posted a video on the price of fuel, electricity, natural gas, and I had comments from the UK saying that their prices on electricity had tripled in the UK. When you look at France, it's not the case because governments took a stance and put a cap on the increase, which comes at a cost for the electrical companies, probably on the taxpayers as well, because ultimately government is going to subsidize. But the consumers are not seeing such a high jump. There's a jump, for sure, there is one, but not 300%. And the same is happening for the food. So what happens when the government doesn't kick in and put the money and people have to face, just like Iran, such high prices? And they went up to government officials' houses here in some places. And here I'm switching to Sri Lanka because that's a second country where it made headlines this week, where people revolting. And what's interesting as well is the explanation, the root cause of the crisis in Sri Lanka. So for months, anti-government protesters have railed against skyrocketing inflation and an economic crisis that has nearly exhausted Sri Lankan foreign reserves. And when I did a little Wikipedia, what is the reason of the Sri Lanka crisis? Very interesting, the answer from Wikipedia. It is largely attributed to economic mismanagement by its incumbent government. It has led to unprecedented levels of inflation, nearly depletion of foreign exchange reserves, shortages of medical supplies, and price increases in basic commodities. Doesn't that ring a bell here? I mean, these are countries depleting their reserves, printing money, inflation going. Sri Lanka is this large island on the map south of India in the middle of the Indian Ocean, very well known for its tea, the Ceylon tea. But talking about India, look what happened this weekend. India just banned wheat exports as it's just running low of wheat and it's keeping it for its own citizens. And that causes a lot of turmoil, including Europe and the US, who are just wondering how to react. And look at the words used in this article. Second paragraph, a global hunger crisis. Yep. Very interesting what's going on abroad. Interesting as well, one of the comments I had on my fuel, so the gas for the car, not the natural gas, the fuel for the car. And also some comments I saw on other channels that were mentioning shortages in diesel, especially on the East Coast right now. There was one comment from an American apparently living in Laos. So Laos is a small country in Southeast Asia. Pretty much saying they were out, completely out over there. No fuel, no way to go around, to shop, to like traffic, like delivery to the stores, they were just completely out. You had to check which gas station was open, had a delivery, and it's a matter of luck here to get fuel. Are we getting there? That's the question. So very interesting to see what's happening abroad in other countries. And it's all over the place. I mean, they're talking about other weather events right now in Brazil that are going to affect again the coffee supply. So what does it mean? Less coffee, increased prices. It's non-stop nowadays. You open the news, you have some bad news of riots, inflation, shortages, someplace in the world. When I say someplace, it might be a lot more than just one place. It is insane. So just wanted to share, open your eyes, not just what you see on the American TV, because it's very filtered and very centric to what's going on here in Washington, D.C. So open your eyes to what's going on elsewhere. Very revealing. So just wanted to share. Hope you found this useful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. Thank you all for watching. So here are some articles that we discussed here, starting with the ones in English, and then you have some in French at the end for the French speakers. The first one here being on Iran and the protests, the fires, and so on. Next here is on Sri Lanka and the crisis there. Very interesting read on that one. I would highly recommend spending a bit of time to understand what's going on in Sri Lanka. And here is a quick search on Wikipedia. You can look it up on the internet yourself on that one. Here looking at the French and sunflower oil shortage here, pushing suppliers to change their formulas and the way they manufactured food. Inflation here and what is changed in the stores starting in March with price increases. Potential lack of or shortages of milk just because some of the farmers are giving up here. And here is about the North Africa, Egypt, and the wheat shortage coming from Ukraine supply chain.